This is about 7 million liters of port that we have here aging at the cellar. As I said, it's not everything, it's the majority, because there's also a big part of the cellar where we have all of the bottles basically aging. So the commercial cellar of the company. So that is not accessible, but we're going to see one of the cellars, in this case, the private collection of the family, which I'm sure that you're going to love it. But so, basically, we just stopped here because we have this beautiful overview of the cellar, which was built in 1819. So since that time, all of the Graham's wines have been aging right here. The oldest, it's from 1882.
That's still here.
That's still here, exactly. It's not much left. To be more precise, 2 barrels, and I'm actually looking at them. We're gonna pass by them and gonna look at them actually closely because it's a very special wine for many different reasons. Not only because the wine is incredible, but because what it represents. Because this wine was actually bought by the first element of the family. So these 2 barrels of port date back, as I said, to 1882. So one of the barrels was bottled, and you can still find it in our shop. So, if you're feeling, I don't know, if you feel like you should, I will advise you to go for it, obviously. So these are incredible wines. Not only they taste great, these are wines that tell much more of a story, because it's impossible not for your mind to wonder when you're drinking a wine like this and try to figure like what was going on in the world at that time, how the world was, and now like this wine is in front of me. It's for me, I mean, I feel like it's a really, really special thing. Not many things in the world can do that, and wine is still one of those that can. His name was Andrew James Symington, and was actually the first Symington to decide to come to Portugal. They were originally from Scotland, from Glasgow to be more precise. When he arrived at that time in 1882. He worked for a while as an accountant, which eventually he started to work closer to the business of port, but in different companies. To be more precise, again, Wars and Dow were the 2 first companies that he worked on. But he decided to buy a few barrels from its arrival time. So that's how we still have some nowadays, because he bought a few barrels at the beginning, and the family's been capping them very closely. And in 2014, they went with the bottling of one of those barrels. So nowadays we have just 2, because one of the other 4 barrels was used just to refill these 2 that we have left. And now it's a decision for the next generations. It might be bottled in 2025, but it might also be bottled in 2080. We never know. It's it's a decision for the next generations of the family. What we really want, again, is to either expose the wine to oxidation or not. And that's the difference in size once more. So, red ports, you have 2 big families. You have the ruby ports and the tawny ports. For the rubies, what we are looking forward to is to keep a youthful style. Flavors that are much more primary, flavors that come from the grape varieties. So to protect those wines from oxidation and retaining those youthful flavors, we use bigger vats, because we are reducing the surface of contact between the wine and the oak. So by not having that much oxidation, we can retain the deeper color, again, those primary berry, blackberry flavors, and still a fairly good structure, still find tannin in these wines. Of course, depending on what we are trying to create in terms of subcategories of rubies, we might keep it just for 1 year or 2, or you can keep it for 6 years, although there is just one that does it, which is the late bottle vintage. And they can either be blended with different years to keep a consistency in style, or they can be only of 1 year. The majority of the production will be wines without a year, mixes of different wines. But for the tawnies, we actually want the opposite. Tawnies, we want to remove completely those fruity, youthful flavors and replace them with tertiary flavors, flavors that come from aging. And that's why we use smaller casks. So we are increasing the surface of contact, much more air goes through the pores of the oak, the grain of the oak, and that way what you're gonna have is, instead of having like a fresh plum flavor, you might start to feel like a prune flavor. You start to get raisins, you start to get walnuts, almonds, spices like cinnamon, clove. It's like beautiful, especially when these wines reach ages like a 1940, when you get this very, very intense, nutty and spicy flavors. And the color tends to get lighter over the times. Lighter, I would say, not as deep dark color as you see a ruby, because once they achieve like 30 to 40 years, the colors actually start to become darker again. This time, not like a dark red, it's more like a dark brown, almost like a cola-like color. And that is, of course, due to the caramelization of sugars and also the amount of wines that we are concentrating in the same barrel. Why is that? Because as these wines keep aging, we always lose some through evaporation. And that amount of wine that we lose through evaporation, we have to replace. So we keep topping up these barrels over the years. So eventually you are concentrating a lot and a lot of wine at the same barrel. And that naturally will make the color of the wine become darker again. Of course, as I said, it's not a youthful dark. It's much more of an aged, intense, brown, dark color from that. So here we can already see also a few different types of tawny ports. The tawny ports mostly divide into big categories. You have the tawnies of age, that are the ones that indicate the age on a label. They will say 10, 20, 30, 40, and now 50 years old tawny. And those are blends again of different years. What we're trying to show you is the character of that age. So usually it's an average. So we might have a little younger wines, a little bit older wines. Our goal is to match the flavor or to show you the best features that the wine of that age might show you. But sometimes we have wines that we believe they are showing something really, really unique and special, and we don't want to lose that within a blend. So we're going to bottle it separately. In those situations, we can either call it in Portuguese colheita, or you can see it written in English saying single harvest tawny ports. We are using the best of the best that was produced in also our best properties in the best years. So those wines, they kind of start their journey as the other rubies. They stay inside of the big vats, but in this case for 2 years only. So think about those 2 years almost like a trial. We are seeing if the wines reach the quality, or if they have the quality that we really want them to have to be a vintage port. So if they reach that quality, then we do a sample of the final blend, and we're going to send it to the VDP, the Institute of Lower Wines and Port Wines. So after the wine goes through a lot of blind tastes and analytic tests, and they kind of are sure that the wine has high quality enough to be a vintage, they then will allow us to bottle. So then we'll have just about 1 year more to bottle everything, and we do that bottling without filtering and clarification. So because of that, we're gonna kind of keep a lot of the aging potential in the wine. All of the other styles of rubies, or the majority of the other styles of rubies, are filtered. So these are wines that don't benefit from extra time in the bottle once they get to you. Vintage is almost solely done with that purpose. So that's why it's only in the best years and it is not filtered at all. So once that the wines are in the bottle, we're then gonna let them rest for many years in our cellars. Of course, a lot of people will tell you exactly the time that you should wait for a vintage port. I think that you should test for yourself, because we never know. We all have different palates, so some of us prefer them a little bit younger, fruitier. Some want to have more tertiary notes, so experience. Try many different ranges of age, and then you make your own decision. So here we already see some very special years. For example, just ahead of us, here, you can see the Graham's 2000 vintage port. So this is actually a very special vintage port to us, because this was the first one that was made using the machines. So almost all the ports before were not done with the machine, but this was the first vintage to be done that way. So it kind of marks the time that we started using this newer system. Of course, turned out so well that we continue using it afterwards. And there you can also see this distinction that we make in vintage ports that we call the classic vintages. You may heard already, like these happen 3 times in a decade. So the classic vintages is these 3 years in a decade that we select to being the best of the best. And usually, for example, in the case of grams, what we do is we're gonna get the best resulting wines from those 5 different properties that are attached to it, and we create almost this super wine with those grapes, with those wines. And that's why you will always only see the name of the brand and the vintage year. That's because, again, since you're using more than grapes from one property, you can't say that it's just for one. That's why you always see brand and year. In the years in between, we still have very well located properties that can achieve that quality. In our case here, the main property is Malbec. So in the years in between of those classic vintages, we do what we call a single quinta vintage. And that's what you may see here on the left when it says Malbec. Of course, in the bottle, we'll still say the brand, we'll still say grams, Quinta dos Malvedos, vintage ports. Okay? So usually these ones give you sometimes more of a sense of place of the property. And I mean, they're still amazing and incredible wines. It's just saying that in those years, sometimes it's more difficult to find more high quality vintage ports. It's not a general as a classic vintage that you can almost enter into a wine shop blind and you'll always find a great bottle of port from that particular year. 97 was one of the classics. The other two for us were 94 and 91. Okay. Which 94 you'll be able to see it right away here. Very special year, the best of the 90s. A lot of people say, me included. Really, really great finds. Then we have the 80s. Here you have all the classics just in front of you, the 80, the 83, and the 85. Then we go a little bit later, not later, earlier, and we go with the 1977. And it gets older. 75, 1970, which again is a very special vintage. 1970 is a special vintage, not only because it tastes amazing, and it's really, really good wine, but it was also the first wine of grams that was done by the Simpson family. Not first wine, but like the first vintage port, because we bought grams in 1970. Pretty brave, and it turned out very well. Here, one of the legendary vintages, 1963. So a really, really, really special year. Everyone that likes sport knows about this year because it's so, so great. Because I don't know if you noticed, but it's also a very particular choice of soil within this cellar. In places where we have vats, you always have this white gravel because it stains really easily. So it's very easy to spot leaks on these vats. And I'm sure that you already spotted a few. So it's okay. Again, we've been testing them, so we know exactly what is going on. And the other type of soil that you find is usually closer to the cat, and it's sand. And sand, it's a way to, again, keep moisture of the building and also help it to cool it down. Because in summer, even here, it becomes a little bit warmer, so we need to bring down the temperature. So we still use a lot of these old methods that they just work. Then we have like eye roofs, just so they work as a heat trap. So everything here is meant to keep these wines in top shape. Every single thing that we do has a crucial role in the final product. So the wines aging always here since their beginning also gives a little touch to the style of the wines.